Normally, I'm not entirely a fan of games that have an isometric perspective, save for a couple rare exceptions. Death's Door is definitely one of those exceptions. Released on July 20th, 2021, I didn't find the game until about a year later when I saw it on Steam. After that, I can confidently say it climbed to be my favorite game I had played that year, and believe me when I say it's up against some heavy competition. Hello again, and welcome back to The Lone Spotlight, where I do my best to show recognition to a variety of games, both old and new, and almost always indie. Games that either have flown under the radar, are incredibly unique, or have played a major part in my life and time playing video games. Developed by Acid Nerve and published by Devolver Digital, Death's Door doesn't really fall into any of those categories directly, but its underlying theme does. Nothing lasts forever. I suppose we'll get right into things, starting with the art style. Death's Door boasts a vibrant, almost cartoony art style that's somewhat reminiscent of the low poly graphics in games such as Gunfire Reborn. Every area has a unique feel and color palette to match the location, from the green and red autumn colors of Grandma's Mansion grounds to the grays and blues of the snowy summit. As previously stated, it is an isometric viewpoint, so you will be viewing the world from a consistent angle. Do not worry though, if you lose sight of yourself from going behind walls or pillars, you'll be able to see a silhouette clear as day. There's also a ton of detail thrown into even the smaller things. One of my personal favorite touches is this sign, right here, pointing you to the direction of the summit. If you interact with it, it works just as any other sign does. However, if you choose to attack it and slice it in half, it becomes two different interactable sign pieces, each reading half of the message. The top half and the bottom half. It's a small touch. They didn't need to add it, but they chose to anyway. Details like that are something that I genuinely love. Let's move on to the controls of the game. Standard WASD for movement, with spacebar acting as a dodge roll and left mouse button to attack. Your right mouse button utilizes your ability depending on which one you have equipped. The abilities you can use are a bow, bomb, hookshot, and a burst of fire. Though you don't get access to all of these at once, however, you'll need to proceed through the game to unlock them. You'll need to utilize all these abilities at various points of the game to fully explore the world and see everything it has in store. Viewing the world from an angle does provide a bit of limited visibility, though you will be able to get used to it pretty quickly. Moving on to the story of the game, I am going to state a massive spoiler warning as we will be diving into the various locations, characters, and story of Death's Door. If you wish to remain spoiler free, you can head to this timestamp or just select the next available chapter. Upon starting of the game, we arrive via a bus to a station in what appears to be some form of void. Stepping off, we see ourselves to be a lovely little crow, the Reapers of the world. This is where you get your first assignment, a large soul located in the Grove of Spirits. Here, the game provides a small tutorial on using your ability to reach targets to open up gates, letting you get used to the controls of the game. At the end of the Grove, you find your assignment, the Demonic Forest Spirit. It's a relatively simple fight. The attack warnings give you plenty of time to dodge out of the way. Before too long, you've done it. You've completed your assignment. Or so you thought. You awake moments later to realize what had just happened, and decide to follow the crow to the Lost Cemetery. This forbidden realm serves as your secondary hub of the game other than the offices. From here, you notice the same exact crow that knocked you out making his way up the mountain, so you decide to pursue him as best you can. Using your knowledge of controls and abilities you learned in the Grove, you slowly make your way up, and find the crow in front of a tall, foreboding door, leading right into a title card! Look, I love dead meat and the joke is right there. It's here where the crow shows you why he stole your assigned soul. Offering it up to the door, the soul disappears, where the crow explains years ago one of his assigned souls escaped through the door. With your assignment now incomplete, you are no longer the immortal Reaper you once were, and you shall start to age like any mortal being out there. This is where I feel what the message of the game is starts to come into play. Death is a force of nature, one that comes for us all at the end, and there's no escaping it. The crows are the reapers of this world ever since Death himself went missing, so souls kept aging and avoiding their expiration date. It now becomes your goal to find 3 different massive souls in order to break through the barrier of Death's Door and get your assignment back, so you can return to your job as a Reaper. If the cemetery didn't tip you off, the estate ground should drive home the fact that this game does in fact reward exploration. While Death's Door is not an open world game by any stretch of the imagination, there are still a ton of things to find in the various maps. from soul chunks to spend on upgrades, to collectible shiny things, and even various weapons. For those who search extra hard, there are also various shrines that can upgrade your health or magic. With 16 total shrines, you can upgrade each stat twice, allowing you to take 2 extra hits and use your ability 2 extra times. Once you start to explore the mansion grounds, you'll meet up with an odd fellow by the name of Pothead. He's just a normal little guy, only his head has been replaced by a large ceramic pot with firewood beneath. Thankfully, he's still able to talk. He might be a small side character, but he's just a funny little guy, where you learn later that his grandma is actually the Urn Witch, who gave him this strange head in an attempt to make him immortal. This is where you learn why you must deal with these massive souls. Since death is nowhere to be seen, and without him, souls run rampant in their desire for immortality, until they're ended by a reaper such as yourself. The Urn Witch is one such soul. Once you enter her mansion, you'll start completing various puzzles, most commonly in the form of lighting your arrows with the pre-lit lanterns. Eventually, you'll find the souls of 4 previous reapers, and in doing so, you unlock a door back to the Hall of Doors. Upon entering this one, you'll notice a large blue chest nearby. Interacting with it sends you tumbling down into the depths of the mimic it turned out to be. Here you must fight off waves of enemies until eventually none stand in your way. Thankfully, this section is not timed, so feel free to run around while figuring out what your next move will be. Some of my favorite music also plays during this section of the game, but we'll get to the soundtrack later. After doing so, you'll learn a brand new ability, the Flame Spell. This way, you'll no longer have to rely on those pre-lit lanterns in order to burn away any cobwebs or vines in the way. You'll also be able to ignite enemies, causing them to take some damage over time. As soon as you finish up your trial and have access to your new ability, you may return to the witch's mansion and enter into her basement. Once again, you'll complete a series of puzzles, now able to complete them thanks to the flame shot, and slowly make your way to the deepest portion where you eventually face off against her. Death's Door does a lot of things right, and the boss fights are for sure one of them. Plenty of fun attacks to dodge, with a fair amount of time to dodge them. They can be difficult fights, but thankfully they're not Souls-like difficulty. Upon returning to Death's Door with your newly acquired Massive Soul, the Elderly Crow determines it's not quite enough energy to open the door. It's here we are sent off to the east, into the forest, at the heart of which lie some flooded ruins guarded by a mad king, not a mad god. I know what some of you are thinking. This is where the game shows its formula. A beginning area to the biome which showcases the types of puzzles and enemies, followed by a dungeon which consists of more of the same puzzles, though more difficult leading up to a boss fight. And this area has one with the longest name I've ever seen. Prepare yourself for Guardian of the Flooded Fortress, Lord of his domain, ruler of all he surveys, champion of the people, keeper of the 5 oaths, first of his name, second of his other name, he who is without middle initial or mercy, destroyer of all those who would question his rightful rule or look at him askance, eater of the vanquished, devourer of the indolent, guzzler of the non-committal, and bestower of wrathful opprobrium, and founder of the most wondrous beneficence. All glory to him and his mace, holy basher of toads, not frogs. But really, what are toads anyway? Like worse frogs, right? Uglier too, smartest creature in all the land, really clever like that Einstein guy, but more handsome and... okay, hit the word count. That was his genuine, full title. Much like the Urn Witch, the Frog King has a variety of attacks and phases, all of which are well telegraphed. Admittedly, I did have trouble finding out just how to damage him, but once I figured out, it was smooth sailing from there. Once again, upon defeat, you capture his soul, where the Gravekeeper holds another service in remembrance. Returning back to Death's Door, the Elderly Crow once again points you in another direction. After this, it's off to the frozen north. Just like the estate in Flooded Ruin, the first area introduces you to the 3 puzzles, second adds a new ability, and third puts your skills to the test before leading up to a boss fight. This time it's with Betty the Yeti. I personally had quite a tough time getting her attacks down, but I eventually made it through after a few tries. She was probably the toughest of all the bosses for me for some reason. For the final time, you head back to Death's Door and offer up all 3 souls, shattering the barrier between the mortal, or rather immortal, realm and the realm beyond. Walking inside, you see nothing but emptiness. A pure white void as far as you can see and even further beyond that. You then hear a voice and turn to see it's none other than the Reaper himself, Death. He asks if you're there to rescue him from centuries of entrapment. It is here where you learn that your entire quest has been for naught. Any incorporeal soul which passes through the door gets absorbed into the Aether in order to create new life. He tells you the story of how he got here, and how he originally reaped the souls of the dead himself before getting trapped within his own door. After hearing that there is no way to return to his immortality, the Grey Crow goes feral and begins attacking you. After a long battle, the crow gets felled, and you leave the Aether with Death beside you. the very crow who sent you on your journey, letting you meet all these wild, zany characters, only for you to reap his soul in the end. But your journey doesn't end here. Death lets you know there's one final being that must be killed in order to restore proper order to nature so that he can continue the real cycle of life and death. The one who we've only met a couple of times throughout the story, and the one who lies in wait, watching over all he's stolen from death. The Lord of Doors. This is where the game puts your skills and abilities to the test. Running through areas that require you to utilize each one of your abilities at various times until a final clash with the Lord right in front of the Vault of Souls. It may be a tough fight, but you'll eventually overpower him and take the life that he wrongfully extended from breaking the agreement with death. One final eulogy from Stedhone the Gravekeeper, death sends the Lord's soul through the barrier between worlds, and the game ends. Or so you thought. There is some post-game exploration with a secondary ending, but I will let you discover that for yourself should you so choose. And now, we move on to something that can take a game to the next level if done properly, or completely take you out of it if not. The soundtrack. Death's Door provides a fantastic soundtrack, with the use of motifs done sparingly but lovingly throughout the whole thing. Composed by David Fenn, every area has similar styles to the music, but still vastly different feels. From the calm, near melancholic sounds of the halls of doors, encapsulating the mystical feeling combined with the monotony of office work, to my favorite track in the game, Avarice. Played during the various wave-based sections before obtaining a new ability, the music just kicks in perfectly and is an absolute pleasure to listen to. All in all, Death's Door is an absolute pleasure of a game to play through, and a wonderful story to be told with an important message to be found beneath. At least, that's what I think the message is. Some of you might know my adoration of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series, and more specifically the Explorers series, and the message of those games tie in with this one as well. Time is finite. Embrace the time you have. Live a life worth living. Thank you all for watching this video. I'm so sorry it took me so long to get it done. Massive writer's block with ADHD is a pain in the ass you wouldn't believe, especially when having an awkward work-life balance. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.